Why would you want to save the universe? I'm one of the idiots that lives in it. That's why. I showed that to my kids. They got to see Guardian of the Galaxy about a couple months ago, and all they knew was that they were a team. They had an idea of the Avengers and that sort of thing. They understand that sometimes superheroes team up, and, and that's a bit of a dysfunctional team. And about halfway through the movie, my son Kenny goes, "Dad, why are these people even a group?" I go, "Well, I don't know." My hometown, Savannah, Georgia, has experienced, like a lot of cities in America, has experienced a revitalization over the past 3 decades, really. And for me, the most noticeable point of that revitalization took place about the time when I went to college. Like right when I went to college, I took a year living in Atlanta, and before I went in high school, I'd maybe go to Mellow Mushroom downtown. There were the classic restaurants we had, the Crystal Beer Parlor, the Pink House, ghost tours on someone's birthday maybe. And that's why you'd go downtown. And when it came time to go to town, we'd be like, "Dad, how do I get there?" And he'd draw a map for you. My dad. I grew up with a dad with an atlas in the back seat of his, the seat of his, the pocket behind his seat. And he'd draw me a map. Here's how you get there, and then we'd come back. And then by the time I came home on his fall break, my sophomore year of college, there's just high school kids hanging out downtown Savannah. Like they're just kind of around. Like it's just like there's shopping there, and things have happened. And now, every time Meg and I go to Savannah, we look around and go, "That's brand new. That's a completely new area. That's done differently." Everything's, and this sort of, but there's a moment where like this critical moment happened where things kind of flipped over, and it was like the whole town of Savannah, the whole city went like, "Hey, downtown's open for business again." And cool restaurants started moving in, and big restaurants and big shopping stores that, like Anthropologie, J. Crew, that we were never cool enough for, never good enough for, they started coming into town. I don't even know if those are still stores anymore, honestly, but that's when they showed up. And it just has kept going for the last 2 decades after. And a lot of it was built on some very smart decisions that were made in Savannah over the last while. First, there is obviously, if you ask anybody what's gone into Savannah that's helped it, is SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. It's one of the premier art schools out there, and out of nowhere you have these just artists just kind of wandering around town with no aim, just kind of wandering and doing stuff, and sometimes just wearing their pajamas all throughout the city and all whatever. But they have these artists who start putting these facelifts all over town. Like SCAD will buy these old buildings, and they have this historic preservation major you can go into, and the kids get to help redo these buildings. And it goes in their portfolio, and Savannah gets a facelift, and it's a lot of cool things. There's cool musicians and cool artists and cool things happening on. You're like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then we have tourism, and people come and they look at our town. They want to move to our town, the whole thing. And then there's population growth, and as population grows, more people come, and as more people come, more stores come. As more stores come, more people want to move in, and they kind of pile on top of each other. And all of it was built on the back of a single fact that everybody's aware of, that somewhere at some point in the history of Savannah, Tom Hanks sat on a bench. And that's what it was. And if I tell you that that's what drove the success of Savannah, at some point you'd stop and go, "Wait, but all those are kind of superficial things, Garrett. All those are kind of like shallow. Artists move into town and they make the city look cool. Stores move into town and make the city feel fun. And Tom Hanks sat on a bench that was never actually there. They brought it and took it with them. You can't find that bench in downtown Savannah. I'm sorry. But you can find a square. It's sitting there. And all of those decisions, all those things that happened pale in comparison to one decision that downtown Savannah made that was long before J. Crew showed up, long before SCAD, long before Tom Hanks sat on a bench. The historic Savannah's historic community made a decision. They said, "We will let you buy property downtown. We'll make it easy. We'll give you good interest rates. We'll make it worth your investment. You can buy property in these old buildings in downtown Savannah. There's only one caveat. You have to live there. You can't buy it and rent it out. You can't be your investment property. It can't be this. You yourself will have to live there. You yourself will have to commute to work from that address and step on those front porches to get your morning newspaper. And you yourself will have to take downtown Savannah and change it from the place where there's the government buildings and the place where there's restaurants and ghost tours, and you will have to make it home. And what happened is all of a sudden you have this influx of people calling downtown Savannah home. And you treat things differently when it's your home, don't you? Megan and I actually lived in downtown Savannah. We lived on top of a historic fried chicken restaurant there, Mrs. Wilkes. It's wonderful. We lived in the penthouse, third story. And you'd walk in, you'd leave for work in the morning, and there'd be a line around the corner of people trying to go to that restaurant. And you'd walk down the sidewalks, and you would see trash. And you're like, who threw trash on this? Who threw trash? There's a trash can right there. Why can't you just? But they don't care. It's downtown Savannah. Them. It's some city across the world from them. For me, it's my neighborhood. And I pick up the trash and I go throw it away because you do things differently than you do when it's a business investment or a shopping district or anything. And because all these people saw this, and because all these people stopped seeing Savannah as something they can get things out of and started seeing it as home, things changed. Savannah became more beautiful. It got safer. I mean, we've never really broken records on safety, but it got safer, you know? And it became better. And it did so for no particular reason other than the fact that it was theirs. They did so just because. And G.K. Chesterton talked about this a long time ago. He said, you know, when you start loving things just because, when you start giving love to things in your life just because, for no other reason than you just do it, those things in your life become beautiful. They just do. And here's what I'm going to read some quotes. He says, people first, he goes, if you go to any great city in the world, what you'll find is that if you trace that history back of that city to the very beginning, there's some sort of sacred well or some stone they thought was great. And as they built their lives around that stone or built their lives around that well, the city around it become great. He goes, the people first paid honor to that spot, and afterwards the spot gained glory. People did not love Rome because she was great. She became great because people loved her. And if you go to Boston, if you go exploring Boston, and you see how their map looks like a giant mess, just a terrible place to drive around, and you ask somebody, they'll go, well, all these main highways we have in Boston, you know what they were? Where the cows used to walk to go into town. They're like, that's how we always do it. Let's just build cities and have all these cars just converge in the middle of town and whatever. I don't live there, so I don't have to worry about it. But it's because they loved the city. That's just where they were, and they loved it, and it became a great city. And that's what they call, the rest of us don't call this, but they call it, does anyone know what they call Boston, up in Boston? The hub of the universe. Stay up there, guys. We don't need you. And then G.K. Chesterton talks about this guy named This is not a guy. It's a town or a neighborhood in London, England, somewhere called Pimlico. And apparently it was just not a very nice area. And he says this: it's not enough to disapprove of Pimlico, because then you'll just move to Chelsea. Nor is it enough to approve of Pimlico, because then it would remain Pimlico, which would be awful. The only way out, it seems, is for somebody to love Pimlico. To love it with a transcendental tie and without any earthly reason. And if there was a man who loved Pimlico, then Pimlico would rise up in ivory towers and golden pinnacles. And Pimlico would attire herself as a woman does when she is loved, because decorations are not given to hide horrible things, but instead to decorate things that are already adorable. And we all understand this. We don't give our children bows to put in their hair because we think they're ugly, but because we think they're beautiful. And we don't give our wives jewelries and necklaces to hide their throats, but because we already love them and find them beautiful. We don't do beautiful things to hide things we think are ugly. We give beautiful things to things we already love. There's actually a name for this when women do this. It's called nesting. And every husband has lived in a house with a wife. He's like, there's no real utility in the changes you're making in this house. It's just changes. I got to get it exactly how I want it. It's going to be my thing. What if I did this with the cabinets? What if all the floors were different next week? And you're like, okay. And what happens at the end of nesting is the house gets better. It doesn't serve any new purpose. It's just better. It's more beautiful. It gets more cozy. It becomes a home because someone loved it just because. We're finishing our series. Every time this year we do a series on the kind of church we want to be. And we're finishing our series, The Church Next Door. And we're going to end here about how this is what God wants His church to be like in the world it exists in. That Jesus has called us to love our world just because. And He says, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. And we're going to finish by looking at a very simple but very powerful illustration that Jesus gives us. And so if you have your Bibles, open up to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to read them right quick, and then we'll go back through them. It goes like this. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. It says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. And in the same way, just like that, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So there it is. There's our passage. Salt, light. You are the salt of the earth. Salt is one of the most essential commodities in the ancient world, by the way. It's not just what you and I think about salt when we think about salt. Have you ever been to, my biggest trial when it comes to salt is you go to McDonald's, you're so excited, you have that giant red thing of French fries. They look beautiful, they're golden. If you've been them a certain way, they look like the McDonald's archers. But then you take a bite and you realize the guy in the room forgot to put salt on it, and you go, what are we doing here, guys? What? Do I look like a psychopath to you? And the whole experience is ruined because there's no salt. Now, that's not what we're talking about when we say salt of the earth, although there's a little bit part of it, but there's more to it. Salt was a preservative. Salt was a thing that kept the world going. Salt was used for health. Salt was used to make things taste better, but it's used to keep the world from breaking down. Right? In the ancient world, you couldn't keep food. You couldn't keep your meat good for long without a refrigerator. And they didn't have refrigeration back there. So what they used salt. If you were a king, how on earth would you send your army out on a military campaign if you didn't have salt? How would you feed people? How would you take care of them? How would you work on it? You have to have salt. And so if you look at some of the ancient places in the world, and you look at the richest people that ever lived, part of what they sold was salt. When you and it happens every once in a while where there's some community that loses power for an extended, it's not like 8 hours, but just lose power. And they don't have it for 3 days, 4 days. About 4 days in, everyone in the surrounding community starts to panic. Why? We got to get these people food. Their food's not going to be good anymore. It's going to go bad. They won't have food. We have to figure out how to help these people because they have a power outage. They have no refrigeration. Not having salt in the ancient world was like having a power outage where things are going to start falling apart here. Things are going to fall apart very quickly. And Jesus goes, you are the salt of the earth. If you're not out there, if you're not there, things are going to fall apart. And so you've got to be there. And if you're not going to be there, if you're not going to be the salt of the earth, then what are we doing here? If salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? There's nothing left to do with it but to throw it on the road, let the animals walk all over it. The church is part of the stability of the world around it. The church is part of the community it belongs to, and the church, whether in the world, whether they know it or not, whether you know it or not, whether you believe it or not, the church and the world around us is in desperate need of the church to be the church. It's the first thing to go off our list. But if we get rid of it, we're going to be in big trouble. Because it's part of the preservation. It's part of the sustaining of the world around us. And the church is meant to be outward focusing. We're not meant to exist inside these walls. We're meant to live in these walls, to gather and be a church together, and then scatter into the parts of the world we exist in and make things better when we're there. We're meant to be outward facing. And nothing illustrates this better than the next thing Jesus says. He says, you are the light of the earth. You're the light of the world. Now, light is an amazing thing because it is in a constant explosion from here to everywhere. It is in constant explosion it always starts here, but it goes there. It never goes inward. It never shrinks. It never stays. In fact, the reason we always talk about black holes, you ever hear scientists on the internet talk about black holes, black holes, black holes? The most amazing thing about the black holes is what it does to light. It's the one place in the universe, according to their math, and I've never been to a black hole, so I don't know what happens there, but it's the one place where light actually shrinks in, where it's actually suppressed, and weird things are done to light there. Everywhere else, it starts here and it runs away. That's what light does. It never turns its beams back on itself. It's always going that way. Here's an example. Look at this drawing of a headlight. This is like a headlight that'd be in your car. Because I know you're thinking, well, Garrett, how come we can direct a flashlight, direct light in a certain direction? Well, every time you create light, you have no choice. It's going to go in every direction. Every single time. It's going to go in every direction. Unless you corral that light in some way. And so what you have here is people who decided, we're just going to make use of the fact that light wants to go in every single direction, and we're going to put mirrors at certain angles so that we can direct it all in one direction. Otherwise, the light's just going to go everywhere. Any light you use, a bulb with a filament, a fire, a candle, whatever it is, it has no choice but to go everywhere all at once. And God's going, that's what you're going to be. This light of the world, shining for everyone to see. A town on a hill cannot be hidden. It's just there. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and it gives light to everything in the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. That's what He wants us to do. And did you notice the reason that Jesus gives us to be salt, to be light, to be the sustaining source in the world, to be these people that point people to Jesus? You know the reason He gave us to do this? He kind of smuggled it in. The words weren't really there, but he smuggled in the reasoning. Did you see what the reason was? Just because. Salt makes the world better. Salt is salty. Salt preserves things. You know why? Because that's what salt does. Just because. Light shines out for everyone to see. Why? That's just because that's what light does. That's what light does. And this is what Peter says. He says, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of the darkness and into His wonderful light. You were once not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And then he says this, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your good deeds and glorify your God in heaven. Why? Because of the grace and the mercy you received from Jesus. Because that's what Christians do. That's what Christians are. And I believe that if our church begins to love our community just because it's there, just because it's ours, it'll change. It'll do what Chesterton said. It'll raise up like a woman who has been loved and attires itself as though it's been loved deeply. That's our town out there. Louisville and Clemens and Pofftown, those are our towns out there. And they deserve to be loved just because. Winston-Salem, that's our city over there. We belong to that city, and that city belongs to us. And our call is to love it just because. Not because we're going to try to get anything out of it, but because it's there. And God has put us here. And you are the salt of the earth. And you are the light of the world. And God's people move out, and they love, and they make this world better. One of the things I hope, I say this every once in a while, I hope that when your season of life at Foothills is over, you move, you retire, you pass away, whatever the reason is, you kind of move on. I hope at the end of that time, you will be able to say honestly, I've never had a pastor who was more affirming and proud of the work I do in my career. Because I am proud of the work you do in your career. I am proud of the fact that there are doctors and nurses and mechanics and IT people and people who work at the Salvation Army and the Habitat for Humanity. I am proud of the work that gets done from the people who belong to this church because our world needs it. They need you there. They need you making your workplace better. They need you making whatever you do. The stay-at-home moms who build the next generation of our family, we need them there. We need the salt and the light at every little nook and cranny of our communities because without it, things start falling apart. I believe, and I think there's good reason to believe this, I believe that every community needs 3 domains to be operating at their best or things start falling apart. That is government, commerce, and religion, church. If one of those stops pulling its weight, things start breaking down. 4 or 5 decades ago, you'd hear this a lot in poor communities, minority communities, where they would call 911, and 911 would be like, well, you can figure that out yourself, or I'm not going to worry about it. That's a community about to start experiencing breakdown. Or maybe where you see on the news, you see in different cities around the world where there's looting or there's people thieving, stealing or whatever. For whatever reason, the cops don't arrest them or whatever. That's a community. There may be churches there. There may be plenty of commerce. The Target's there. It just keeps getting broken into. But it's one group not pulling its weight. And that's a community that's about to be experiencing breakdown. Let's go to a different area. The states we call the Rust Belt. Well, what is that? Those are the states where 30 years ago the factories started moving out of town and the economic production went through the floor. People couldn't get jobs. The economy never really recovered. We nicknamed it the Rust Belt. There were churches there. Some of the best churches in the world are in Ohio. There's churches all over the place in Indiana, all over there. There's churches there. They have the government. They have social services, but it's the commerce is not there like it used to be. And I know it sounds shallow, but it's not. We need you out there. We need everyone pulling their own weight. And without it, things start to break down. So much so that we nicknamed it the Rust Belt. Now, allow me to finish proving my point. Are you ready? Because I know you're in agreement with the government, you're in agreement with commerce, but really, Gary, church, that's the third pillar, that's the third leg of the stool, really? Yeah. About a year ago, you remember, there was a whole spate of stories. Everyone has their favorite politician. There's a whole spate of stories of different politicians in different areas had these horrible stories coming out. Remember? We all went, oh no, not that guy, not that lady. Oh no, please don't. And it was like the one after the next, one after the next, one after the next. And these stories started coming. And you go, what are you doing? How is that part of your life? What's happening here? It's not that they're poor and needy. It's not like they're reacting out of need. They have all the money they can need. They have the government. They are the government. And then remember the other side of America, Hollywood, the stories that came out of there, they just starts, every once in a while, they start popping up. You go, wow, okay, wow. You start, every 2 years, you hear another story about how the kids who grow up on the Disney Channel never age well. And you start hearing about the Diddy parties and all these sorts of things. You started going, whoa, time out. What's happening there? They have all the money you could ever need. They have the government. The government's there. What do they not have? The church. The church was something they walked away from long ago. And when you looked at the moral censor, of their being, it was this religious view that said anything goes. And when one of the three stops pulling its weight, things break down. Things break down. And so, what should we do as Christians in this day and age? We should look at our towns. And we should look at our city. We should look at our schools and love them just because. Because they need us out there. We have a new librarian at our local branch over here. She's been there about a year at this point. She puts on cool events for our town. Sarah and I went to one the other last Christmas time. Does really cool things. Seems to be a really great leader. What if Foothills became known around town as the church is just kind of, we're just there to cheer people on. Every time the city's doing something, every time the library's doing something, we're like, hey, how can we help? What can we be part of? Can we just come? We want you to be a success because we need you there, and we just love you. We're going to be there, and we get known around town as like, hey, why does Foothills care so much about what the public library is doing? Because it's there. Just because. What if the school system, what if the elementary school or the two high schools closest to us got to a point 5 years from now where the first time they felt need of something, they said, I know what we can do. We could call Foothills Christian Church. We can see what they can do to help us with this problem. Why would we call them? Because they love us, just because. We're not getting anything out of that school, really. It's basically written in the law, we're not allowed to get anything out of that school. But we love it because it's ours. Because it's there. And as we begin to pour into this city and love it just because, who knows what God will do with it. There's an idea out there. It's called deism. Have you ever heard of deism? Deism is one of the great swing and a miss ideas of the history of the world. Deism is the idea that God exists, He exists, and then just walked away from everything. He cared so much to create this world that works perfectly, that revolves around the sun, that has to be so just so it can work and exist and be alive, to have life on it or whatever. And then He got done with that perfect, wonderful creation. He came up with it and was like, I'm done with it. Never mind. I don't want to do that. And you know what? We don't worship a deist God. One of the great ideas in Christianity is that you become like what you worship. And we don't worship a deist God. Jesus Christ is an outright affront to the idea of deism. Jesus Christ was God coming into the world, not turning His back on the world. Coming into the world and saying, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to love you. In fact, one of the great passages in the Bible is John 1, and here's the Message translation of it. The Word became flesh and blood, meaning the Word was, it's a whole chapter. God became flesh and blood. And I love how Eugene Peterson puts this. And He moved into our neighborhood. Isn't that a great way to put it? I love it, especially for this sermon because I'm proof text and everything. Now listen, I'm joking. Listen, you become like what you worship. And the reason you're the salt and you're the light is not because you're better or anything. No, it's because you love the light of the world, the true light of the world, Jesus Christ. You love the true salt of the earth, Jesus Christ. And as we worship Him and as we follow Him, we will become like Him. And because of that, we don't get to dust off our hands. Say, well, my family's fine. We don't get to dust off our hands and walk away from the world that needs us so bad because we don't worship a deist God. We worship Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ loved us just because. And we want to love the world just because. And I'm reading this book called God in the Garden, The God of the Garden by Andrew Peterson. I'm going to, the band, you can kind of come up. I want to end by reading the end of a chapter that I read. Yeah, come on up. And Andrew Peterson is basically an autobiography that he's doing, and he's comparing it to, he's connecting his life with this story of trees out there because it's all connected, and it's sounds weird, but it's a nice little read. And here's what he says. He's talking about Shiloh. Now, his mother and father, his father was a pastor of a Christian church down in Florida for a long time. And they always lived in a parsonage. Do you know what a parsonage is? Parsonage is the house that belongs to the church that the pastor gets to live in rent-free. And also he's always there so you can find him. So, like, that's it. And they lived in the parsonage. Eventually in their life, they were able to buy some land out in the country and live on their own land, and they named it Shiloh. And here's what he says. It grieves me to know that whoever ends up with those 6 acres 50 years from now will most likely tear down the house and uproot the trees. It's unfathomable to me that anyone will come along and care for it the way they have. Shiloh was lovely when my parents acquired it, but in the last 2 decades, the structure and the grounds they have tended and they have been tended and kept by a son of Adam and a daughter of Eve. They have given themselves to the renewal and flourishing. I didn't grow up there, but in a very real sense, my children did, and my parents did too. The little girl and the little boy deep within the bones of my parents came alive there. It's like they were still playing house even when their hair went gray and their joints stiffened. Who they became is intimately connected to the land that they have loved into its own becoming. And now they are old and certainly wondering often what will become of this home that they have made. But that doesn't stop them. The lushness of the place is fleeting and all the more precious for it. How marvelous it is to work to sustain a beauty that you suspect with good reason its beauty will fade as soon as you take your hand off the plow. And with each visit to Shiloh, I'm confronted with 2 realities, the garden and the fall. Shiloh to me is the best of what can happen when humans root themselves in a place. Not only does the place grow better, but the humans do too. And when I wander the property, Eden's voice rises from a whisper to a song. And it's easier to see what we were meant for, to love the world as God does, shaping it to reflect what it was in the beginning, and even greater glory to what it will be in the end. What will become of my mother's garden with her mother's hands plunged in the dirt to plant the hydrangeas? What will become of my father's word shop where he, with a pipe in his teeth, happily turns candlesticks on a lathe? Will my kids take their kids to visit Shiloh? It's possible, I suppose, but I doubt it. Someone else will buy the place. We'll lose our connection to it. The great sadness of time will bulldoze it beyond recollection. And here's where faith strides onto the scene, clothed with vitality to remind us of the hope it plants, the love it grows. I have faith that there is a resurrection coming. In our present sufferings, they are nothing compared to the glory that will be revealed in us. And if our stories are part of us, then it follows that they will be resurrected too. And I don't know if some redeemed corner of Shiloh will occupy that corner of Florida, but I believe this. In some sense, we're all living in a parsonage, longing for a true home. And in the same way, Art and Janice Peterson grew as they poured their love into Shiloh and fashioned a garden. We, priests of the new kingdom, will be clothed immortal to reign over our own gardens. And we'll do it without the specter of death over our heads and the lie of futility. Glory be to God. Time itself will be redeemed because it will no longer be an adversary but a friend, an everlasting Sabbath, and an unending rest. If my mom and dad made Shiloh in 30 years, what can they do in a million? This is the time that God has given us to have our hands on the plow in Louisville, and Clemens, and Tofftown, and Winston-Salem. This is the time where we have come together to be the church in this area at this time in history. And what can God do for the next 10, 20, 30 years of this church? What can happen if we look at this world like a garden God has given us to be in charge of? Priests of the new kingdom, making the world better as we go. What can we do? I don't know. I don't tell the future. But here's what I do know. A new heaven and new earth is coming. And our work will be better then. Our work will be perfect then. Our bones won't get tired. Our hearts won't grow downcast. We will work for 1,000,000 years to make the beauty and the wonder and the glory of this world 1,000 times better than we could ever be today. But in this life, we get to practice. In this life, we get to learn skills. In this life, we get to be everything God wanted us to be. And when we take our hand off the plow, we will hear from our Father in heaven, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That day is not here yet. Right now, we get to love this place just because. Friends, you are the light of the earth. You're the salt of the earth. And I'm glad to be in this fight with you. Will you pray with me? God, thank you for